The Leafs streak reaches 4 games as they picked up another victory over the St. Louis Blues as Auston Matthews moves 1 goal closer to 50. I'll discuss that and more on today's edition of the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You're Locked On Maple Leafs, your daily podcast on the Toronto Maple Leafs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Leafs podcast, your daily fix for all things Leafs. I'm your host, David Morassutti. Mike DeStefano is not joining us today. He is dealing with a little bit of a flu bug, so you got me today. And just a reminder, everyone, that Locked On Leafs is a daily Maple Leafs-centric podcast, so make sure you subscribe for free wherever you get your podcast from. And you can catch us up on YouTube. Make sure you go and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Locked On Leafs. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. I'm sure many of you who might have put a bet on the Leafs to beat the St. Louis Blues came out pretty happy with a 4-2 victory, now pushing their winning streak to 4 games. Coincidentally, 4 games out of the 5 that Morgan Rielly has been missing with a suspension. And I don't know about you, this has been quite an enjoyable week. Not because Morgan Rielly's been out and the Leafs have been dealing with the banged up blue line, more so because we're seeing this team really start to come into their own a little bit here. Obviously, a 4-game winning streak has now put this team back into the top 3 in the Atlantic. I mean, they did pass with the victory on Saturday against the Ducks, but right now what they're doing is they're getting some separation in the standings, right? And so I'm going to kind of go forward and looking at, the Atlantic Division and where the Leafs kind of sit and all those things. But let's focus specifically on the game, okay? Because I don't know about you. I don't know if it was because it was the early start. Obviously, this being a noon start in St. Louis, 1 p.m. Eastern start for those of you that watch on the East Coast. I did get somebody on Twitter, I believe they were in Scotland, saying it was nice to watch Leafs at a reasonable hour. Kind of reminds me why these afternoon games mean a lot to our fans overseas. I think it's nice that you guys are able to watch that at a reasonable hour. So I'm glad you were able to enjoy that game, especially because you're able to watch a Leafs victory. And it was a tough start. As I said, it was like a snooze fest team. Neither team was really pushing the envelope really to get things going. First period was a lot of low event stuff. Then the second period happened. The Leafs certainly got their legs under them, obviously with Matthew Knies scoring the first goal of the game on a great move around Colton Parayko, and just a great setup by Auston Matthews too. So good start. Mathew Knies is now up to 10 goals on the year. And yes, the Blues did respond late in the period on the power play with Brandon Saad tying the game. And then the third period, that was quintessential Leafs, picking moments, right, to attack when the moment called upon itself, right? You have Auston Matthews getting himself open into the slot, Mitch Marner feeding him for goal number 49 on the year. I think the more impressive one, you see William Nylander picking off a pass shorthanded. Him on the penalty kill has really been an added bonus, I think, for this team, and where more teams are going with their penalty kill, which is to get their skilled players out there and turn that penalty, the shorthand time, into maybe an opportunity to get some offense going, especially with teams, the other team on the power play thinking all offense with the way that they deploy their lineup. So a great move by Nylander to fake the pass to Holmberg. Great on Holmberg for, putting himself in a position to make the goaltender have to half and half commit to the pass and the shot, giving Nylander the opening that he needed to score there. And of course, the Blues they made sure the Leafs realized they were still in this game with the late goal, with the empty net. And then the Leafs obviously finished things off to win it 4-2. So a very tidy victory, I think, for the Leafs. What was obviously the impressive part about it was banged up blue line, right? Going into the game, we had Timothy Liljegren, a game time decision. Jake McCabe was a game time decision. William Lagesson did not end up playing in this game, which means that Marshall Rafai got to play in his first NHL game. So there was a lot of question marks, right? We felt like there was concern about whether or not this blue line could hold up in a game like this. And we'll give a little bit of a shout out to the blue line in our 3 stars. Don't you worry. But I thought that was a gutsy performance from that blue line. The Blues, I understand they're not, an elite team. They're still a good team. They are a team that's in the playoff race in the Western Conference. They have good players. So that was a big test for this Leafs blue line to really step up and continue to hold the fort down. And especially because of how banged up they are. And then there's been a few guys who have really been the catalyst throughout this entire stretch here. Okay. And so obviously the good part here is that the Leafs pick up another victory. They do it without Morgan Rielly. And you know what? We saw the contributions up and down the lineup, different players contributing in different parts. Obviously, the big one here is the Leafs decided with Tavares back in the lineup, Noah Gregor was the one to come out. He's been goalless for the last little stretch here. He's struggled, I think, to kind of find his offense. And if he's not providing offense, is he providing something else? But what I think it speaks more to of is not about Noah Gregor's play, but Bobby McMann's play, because he is giving the Leafs no reason to take him out of the lineup. And what makes me happy about what's going on with Bobby McMann right now is he's doing it in a role that I think, shows that he can be more than just a fourth line player. And to me, he was more than a fourth line player when you saw him play with the Marlies. He's a guy that can thrive in those areas higher up in the lineup. And what does Sheldon Keefe do? He puts him right up on the second line with Tavares and Nylander. And to me, it's what I've been waiting for with Sheldon Keefe, to finally give Bobby McMann that not just Bobby McMann, a young player that opportunity, rewarding a player who has done what the coach is clearly expecting of him. Now, look, the player has to obviously put himself in a position to get those opportunities. I understand that. And that's what Bobby McMann has done. That's depth. That's something that this team has lacked throughout the years. Not just depth, but depth from your own development, right? Not having to go out and trade for a guy like Bobby McMann because you have a Bobby McMann available to you. So if I'm Sheldon Keefe right now, the lineup that you see, that lineup should stick for the next little bit. There really shouldn't be any changes to that forward group going forward, because this is actually, I've really liked the balance that we've seen throughout the lineup. Yes, would you like to see Bertuzzi play in the top 6? That's what he's being paid for. Has Bertuzzi worked well with Domi and Robertson? I think he's worked quite well with them. Hasn't always necessarily led to goals. Also, side note, Tyler Bertuzzi, next time you get an open net, maybe don't try to go bar down on it. Don't need to do that. Obviously, he rushed the shot trying to get it. I just didn't like that he was trying to go for the goal. Didn't happen, and then it ends up in the back of their own net. Only negative really part I have from that Leafs game was that Bertuzzi moment. But to me, if I'm Sheldon Keefe and I'm seeing how Bobby McMann is playing, I'm giving no reason to move that guy lower in the lineup right now. I'm glad. Now, you never want to see a guy get scratched. Noah Gregor. To me, I'm putting Bob McMann over Noah Gregor anytime right now because one guy is doing more with his opportunity. Noah Gregor, I guarantee at some point, he'll get back into the lineup. There's no doubting about that. Guys will need breaks. Guys, knock on wood that there's not a significant injury. Guys are going to be hurt, banged up. They need to get their depth going. But right now, there's no reason to play a Noah Gregor right now because Bob McMann is playing that much better. Pontus Holmberg is providing a little more versatility, right? He could play different positions. So I've really enjoyed what I've seen from the depth stepping up, and Sheldon Keefe being able to kind of make the lineups a little more balanced the one we saw, earlier to start the year. But there were still some good moments from this game. There's still some good individual performances I do want to highlight from this game. And we'll do that in our 3 stars of the game here on the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of the Locked On Leafs podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. Get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Because right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. We even want to go and look at betting Auston Matthews in the Hart Trophy race. You might be able to get him at some plus money over there. Rock Richard, likely not going to get as much value there because he is looking like the far and away winner in that regard. But you can also bet on your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and more. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA and the Locked On Podcast Network. Hello and welcome back to the Locked On Leafs podcast. David Morassutti here. Mike DeStefano, he's dealing with an illness. We're going to give him some time to recoup and get back into the swing of things. So we're going to continue to break down this 4-2 victory over the St. Louis Blues. And what we do after every Leafs victory is we give our 3 stars of the game. And let's start with the 3rd star, my 3rd star. I'm going to go with the defenseman who has had a really rough season. And he has really stepped up. We talk about players needing to step up when, guys get hurt. In this case, it's been a suspension to Morgan Rielly. Some of you might think it's one particular defenseman. Some of you might think it's someone else. My defenseman, who's getting my 3rd star, is TJ Brody. Because TJ Brody has really been a whipping boy this season. And understandably so, he's really struggled this year. You could tell he's taken a bit of a step back. Now, TJ Brody's had to deal with a lot personally. For those of you who don't know, he's dealing with some family illnesses and things like that. His father passing away. It's been a tough season for TJ Brody. But since Morgan Rielly has been out, we have really seen TJ Brody step up, especially on that pairing with Timothy Liljegren. Give Timothy Liljegren a lot of props too. That blue line has really worked this year. And so that blue line pairing has worked this year in this last little bit here. Nick Ashbourne wrote in his observations for The Athletic after the game, he said that Brody and Liljegren, when they were out on the ice at 5-on-5, more so specifically Brody, the Maple Leafs outshot the Blues 14-1 and had a 0.004 expected goals against. The lowest total on the team, despite the fact that he played the most minutes at 5-on-5. He played over just a few seconds over 20 minutes, 20 minutes and 7 seconds. TJ Brody has not been given the easy assignments since Morgan Rielly's been out. And everyone's talking about how the defense is playing better. I just think that what's happened here is TJ Brody is someone that, he might have been dealing with something injury-wise earlier in the year. We don't really know. But I don't know what's happened this last stretch. Some people might say it's because Morgan Rielly's not playing with them. Timothy Liljegren, hate to say it, hasn't exactly been a stalwart defensively. He's been good. I know he hasn't exactly been great. But I think TJ Brody has really stepped up. He had a huge block early in the game, and it didn't phase him. He continues to be a important part of this blue line here with Rielly out. And this is how you get over, a situation like this, especially with other guys who have been struggling with injuries. We know Jake McCabe has been taking his fair share of beatings, the last little while here. So having TJ Brody being able to step up here is good. What that means for the rest of the season, I'm going to kind of discuss a little bit of that in the final segment here, but I think TJ Brody definitely deserves a lot of kudos, and as Ashbourne did in his kind of top start of the game, I also gave TJ Brody my 3rd star. Second star, I struggled a little bit here, not going to lie, because two players really kind of stood out to me. And I should be giving it to Auston Matthews. I think I'm going to stick with Auston Matthews as my second star. Yes, 49 goals, and he could have had 50 tonight. He could have had 50 in that game, but unfortunately, the puck didn't kind of bounce his way in a few moments in the game. But, there's no doubting. Now, knock on wood, I really hope that I don't jinx Matthews. I hope he doesn't go the rest of this road trip without scoring. But there's going to be no better place for him to break the 50 mark than in Arizona. But I do think that what Auston Matthews is doing right now, and we talked about this on the last show, if he's not has not been brought up in the Hart Trophy conversation, those are Leaf haters, because what he has done on a consistent basis is something we have not seen in a really long time. He is going to get to 50 goals, and he's going to do it in fewer than 60 games. Let's just take a minute here to realize that. He could very well hit 70. It's not guaranteed, but the chances are really high considering how he's scoring and considering he is not stepped down from against good teams. He is still scoring against good teams. There are some good, tough teams coming up, and I think Auston Matthews will continue to step up in those moments. So 49 for Matthews. Really thought 50 was going to happen, but it might work out better that he does it in Arizona, probably in front of a lot of friends and family there as well. Let's now go to the first star because it is another Arizona reference here. Arizona-born player, Mathew Knies, 10 goals on the year. That might not sound like a big deal to some, but considering you got Matthews at 49, you got Nylander at 29, Mathew Knies at 10, can he get to 20? 20 goals to me is a pretty good mark for a rookie who's not featured prominently in a team's offensive game plan. And what I mean by that is, yes, he does play top line with Mitch Marner and Auston Matthews. His job is not to be the offensive driver of that line. His job is to do the grunt work. His job is to set up Auston Matthews and Mitch Marner. Well, more Matthews than Marner in this case. But what Mathew Knies has done this season is no short of, I've been impressed with him. I've had moments where I was concerned about him a little bit, and it looked like the moment was getting too much for him, but he continues to work at it. If you haven't watched the Leafs are doing these new series now called the Blue Room, where they're interviewing players and kind of getting to know the players a little bit. We're learning a little more about Mathew Knies. First off, I forgot that he's not even living with John Tavares anymore. Sorry to burst anyone's bubble. He's actually living on his own now. He is taking the maturation step of his game to the next level, in my opinion. I'm seeing the things that a lot of people were noting when he was drafted, why they thought maybe he could have come earlier than he did to the NHL. I think they made the right call of him staying in college a little bit longer. But we have to remember that, yes, while he did come later in the year and played in the playoffs, this is his first full season in the NHL. When you go from college to the NHL, I think there's the transition is not easy. They play fewer games in college. The grind is not as hard in college as it is in the NHL. So the fact that he's able to kind of find himself again here at this point of the season, he's really starting to come on his own a little bit, I think is really important, because I think the Leafs need a guy like Mathew Knies, right? It only benefits Matthews and Marner more when that third guy is someone that the other team has to keep an eye on, right? Colton Parayko probably didn't expect Mathew Knies to deke him out of his skates, and I don't think the Blues expected him to go bar down like he did. All the Leafs fans kind of did. He is very much capable of it, but I think that's just it's a great moment for him. I think he's really come along here so far, and so this only helps the Leafs to get that depth scoring that we've been talking about. Between Bobby McMann, now Mathew Knies. Sure, you like a few more players to kind of add in along the way there, but the Leafs are not struggling to find guys to score right now. Luckily, we've got a few guys now outside of the core four that are doing it, and so I think Matthew Knies definitely deserves. He definitely deserves the nod as the first star. And they were asking him after the game about going to Arizona, right, and playing in front of fans and family, and he says, "Yeah, I think we got about 50, 60 tickets sold. It probably fills up about a section." He just what an answer. That alone should have made him first star of the game. But I just think seeing what he has done this last few, I think the last few games, you're really starting to see him pick his game up a little bit. After some were maybe concerned that he was hitting the rookie wall a little bit this year. You know who's not hitting the wall right now? The Toronto Maple Leafs. They are now on a 4-game winning streak. They have won all 4 games since Morgan Rielly was suspended. And the storyline right now is, did Morgan Rielly give the Leafs the spark that they need? I'm going to discuss that on the next segment here on the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Today's episode of the Locked On Leafs podcast is also brought to you by Game Time. You shouldn't have to worry when you buy tickets to your next big event. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seats, and their best price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. If you're someone who wants to go and buy a ticket for the Leafs, whether it's in Arizona, Vegas, or Colorado this week, you should be using the Game Time app. You can get some last-minute ticket deals. You can even find the seat. You can see right where your seat is. You get the lowest price guarantee. You get event cancellation protection, all those things. That's why I like using the Game Time app if I'm looking for last minute tickets. And all in prices show your total up front, so you know what you're getting a great deal before you even check out, and you can buy tickets in seconds with 2 taps. Game Time has deals on tickets right up to the start of the event, and even an hour after it starts. It's the place to find the last minute seats. Find exclusive flash deals and sponsored deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. With zone deals, you pick the section. Game Time picks the seats for big time savings. And the Game Time guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code Locked On for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Welcome back to the Locked On Leafs podcast. David Morassutti here solo with Mike DeStefano not feeling great. So Leafs, as we said, 4-game winning streak, 4-0 since Morgan Rielly has been suspended. There was people were suggesting that we might have heard some sort of update from the NHL that the league was going to rule on the appeal for Morgan Rielly. Some even thought maybe before the game to maybe give Morgan Rielly a chance to play against the Blues. I thought that was a bit of wishful thinking. The NHL is never really fast in these regards, but I'm a little surprised we haven't heard anything yet, just because I don't know what's taking so long. Like, really, I understand Gary Bettman had the outdoor stadium series games this weekend, but how much time do you need to appeal this sort of process? Morgan Rielly went in, he did his appeal, he got his chance to plead his case. I don't know if maybe the NHL doesn't want to set a precedent of how quickly they want things done. I'm not going to be the one that says it's a Leafs thing. I don't think that's the reason why. I don't know. I just think that maybe this is a situation here where the NHL and the NHLPA need to come together and say, look, if an appeal you get, like, let's make one thing clear. Morgan Rielly had only 48 hours to decide whether he wanted to appeal, right? And we found out not too long after the suspension was done that appeal was going to be done, because the NHL and NHLPA have a deadline. They have an agreement that has to be done in this time. I think it's time for the NHLPA and the league to have a new agreement, which is if an appeal has been done, a decision needs to be rendered within 48 hours. If a decision can't be done within 48 hours, I don't know why it can't be. I personally just can't see why the league can't figure out. I understand that there's a lot of circumstances involved that the league has to be mindful of, not overriding too many of the decisions made by the Department of Player Safety. You have to show that you have their backs. I get all that, but if you're not going to rule on it, just say you're not going. Just say you're not going to rule in the favor of the appeal. Like, it's not that difficult. And look, do I think the league is going to reduce Morgan Rielly's suspension? I highly doubt it. I just think that this was such a high profile case that I don't think the league this is a suspension that a lot of people say is going to set a lot of precedents going forward, right? So I just think the NHL could have made life a little easier for themselves to give the ruling, put the issue to bed. Just say we're not accepting the appeal. We're going to uphold the decision. Rielly suspended 5 games. Or they can say, you know what, we're reducing it by 1 game. Morgan Rielly can come back for the next game. I think the Leafs would like to know if there's a potential of Morgan Rielly playing in Arizona. I think a lot of people would like to know that. So maybe we get a decision on Tuesday. We'll see. As I'm recording this, we have not heard anything from the NHL yet. If they do, we'll discuss it on the next episode. Which now brings me to the next part here, which is the Leafs being 4-0 with Rielly out. Hearing some of the post game from the players, and obviously William Nylander was kind of a big one, and Mathew Knies were kind of big. I would say big sound from this game in terms of players who really kind of stood up and said that Morgan Rielly's decision to go after Ridley Gregg after he took the slap shot on the net, I think it galvanized the team. We Mike and I discussed whether or not this was going to be a kind of like a turning point or a motivating point, and I had my I was reserved a little bit because this team hadn't been playing great. They played really bad against the Senators, and so it's kind of hard to say whether or not that was going to happen. And guess what? It's happened. This team has rallied behind Morgan Rielly because, as we have said many times on this podcast, John Tavares is the captain. No ifs, ands, or buts about that. If I was to give another player that C, and I've said this many times before, it would be Morgan Rielly, because I think he is the emotional leader of this team. He is one of the longer tenured Leafs on this team. He has been through a lot with this team. And we said that moment, I think, was more of a message to his teammates. Yes, it was also a message to Ridley Gregg not to shoot the puck in his net like that, not to take a slap shot like that. Don't rub in the fact I'm not going to get into that. What I think it also shows his team is I'm pissed off about the way we've been playing to teams lower than us in the NHL. We should not be losing to teams like this, especially the way that the Leafs have been losing to those teams. What have the Leafs done? Steamrolled the Ducks, one of the worst teams, if not the worst team in the NHL. Beat the Blues twice, a team that's, again, they're a playoff team, but also a team that's had their struggles this year, right? And the Flyers team that has played pretty decently, but again, the Leafs should beat the Flyers. The Leafs have left no doubt in those games. And I've actually enjoyed watching this Leafs team play. A lot of people have been talking about how they've really enjoyed what's happening here. That, in my opinion, and some of you could disagree on this, I think Morgan Rielly's his suspension has given this team the kick in the rear that honestly Sheldon Keefe hasn't been able to get. He has not been able to get this type of response from this team. Right now, other factors have played into in this too. Bob McMahon has played out of his mind, right? Auston Matthews has been scoring a lot of goals, and it lost in all this. Ilya Samsonov has won 7 of his last 8 games. You heard me right here. Ilya Samsonov has won 7 of his last 8 games. Nobody probably would have seen that coming. we were ready to send this guy away for a long time, right? And look, some people say, "Oh, we've heard this story before. It's nothing new." But it can't be understated that when a team is struggling, has their struggles defensively, when the team maybe doesn't have the defense that the Leafs have, right? The Leafs don't exactly have an elite blue line. It's been made known. When a team has goaltending like the Leafs have been getting, they're going to win more games than not. Ilya Samsonov has played so well this year since coming back. He has given this team some confidence behind them. That blue line has not been great, but it hasn't been as bad as we thought they were because they are vastly outperforming the teams in this 4-game stretch. I think that's the key part here. It's not that they're winning these games. They're winning them by a large margin. The Leafs have a combined score of 21-7. So 21 goals for, 7 goals against in these last 4 games. Yes, a 9-2 victory kind of inflates that a little bit, but even if you take that out, okay, if you want me to do the math here, that's 12-5. Right? This is a team that has really found consistency in their game. If they can go on a long run like this, when Rielly comes back, and I think they can continue this with Rielly back. I think they got to maybe shade back some of Rielly's minutes here a little bit. I think that's what this last stretch has kind of shown us. I do really think, though, that the Leafs are well on their way to more so earning the trust of management to go out and improve this team. If this is the play we're going to get from the Leafs against the good teams, now look, they have been doing it against St. Louis, Anaheim, and Philly. Let's see now when you got now Arizona is now on a 10-game losing streak. So that's another team I'm expecting them to beat, and we'll discuss a little bit more on the next episode. You've got Vegas. You've got Colorado. Actually, you got Vegas twice and Colorado. That, to me, will be the true test whether this team has really turned the corner and is really starting to show that it can be a contender. Because if they start to play if they play like they have been playing against Vegas and Colorado, I think Brad Treliving feels a little more comfortable buying in for this year. I really do. Now, look, we've seen how they played all year long. We know they've been vastly inconsistent, and a 4-game stretch probably doesn't change enough minds. But again, if this is a stretch of 10, 15, 20 games, Mike and I discussed this going into the trade deadline. If they go on a run here, it makes management's decision a little bit easier to go in for certain upgrades that this team still needs. Third line center, probably, and help on the blue line. How much they can do remains to be seen. But I think the Rielly suspension really gave this team a kick in the rear, and I think they've really followed up with some really great play. And so let's see if they can continue it. It's been very enjoyable to watch. We'll see if they can continue this as they get set to continue their road trip. We'll preview the next game against Arizona Coyotes, discuss maybe we'll have a Rielly decision made on the appeal by then. We'll also see what else the team is going to do in the Atlantic Division. I think the Atlantic is not now. Florida's playing really well. I think they have given themselves the best chance to finish first in the division. Second, let's see if second place is still involved. I'll discuss that with Mike on the next episode. Maybe Mike will want to discuss that and how the Leafs can potentially go on a nice run here going into the trade deadline. But until then, we'll discuss that on the next episode. Thank you all for listening and supporting the show. Make sure you go and subscribe wherever you get your podcast from. Make sure you click the notification on YouTube so you get each and every video when it's published right to you so you can make sure you don't miss any episodes. Tell all your friends. Until then, keep it locked right here on Locked On Leafs.